Hello everybody, my name is Joe Needleman. I've been a member of SWIFT for not very long, but I have been a radio operator for over 10 years. And during that time I have seen how radio changes and really gotten a feel for what people are interested in with radio. So to start, what do you people think radio is, ham radio is? Not you. Anybody else?
The pig?
Yeah, pig radios.
Bacon
radio.
Well, it isn't this.
It's
No,
that.
not
That would
that
be
again.
awesome though.
It also isn't this. This is CB radio. This is very different from ham radio. What is ham radio? Ham radio is a way of communicating with people. It's a way of seeing the world, and it's a way of organizing things. It's a license, and it's a philosophy. It's been in existence for over 100 years, at least. Probably about 200 now. As the FCC puts it, which is the group that's in charge of radio, ham radio is a service for the purpose of training, intercommunication, technical investigation, and is carried about by amateurs that are duly authorized persons with interest in radio techniques. So there's nothing official about it except for a license. Anybody can do anything they want as long as it's legal. The history of ham radio starts out very simply as people building kits after Morse code was invented. They started experimenting and developing new systems, and slowly people began to do some very interesting things with radio. And if you look at the picture up here, I think you'll agree that most people would not want to do this today. This is a home-built radio with antenna in the Alps where the guy was going skiing and trying to talk to people as he skied down the mountainside. Now, it's changed since then too, but during World War II, radio operators were the key link between the war and America itself. During the war, the amateur radio operators in Hawaii and stuff were actually warning the Army about incoming planes and incoming problems that were happening. They were ignored, but that changed. Radio has long been used for emergencies, and that started about when the Titanic sunk. There were no standards back then. The standards were the European version and the American version. And what happened was when Titanic, I'm sure you know, sent out a distress, they were sending out a distress call for European radio operators. The Americans had no idea what they were doing. After the Titanic sunk, they agreed that ham radio needed to be organized a bit better, and it turned into something that is more like today. If you want this link, we'll show you more about it. Now, as I was saying before, ham radio has a long history of being used in emergencies, and there's no exception like Hurricane Katrina. This is a clip from a news broadcast and later actual emergency response from ham radio operators. And this is the type of thing that happens when there's a need. So let's see if we can hear this.
Press it again.
In before it's
It'll
blocked.
surely work this time.
Weblink blogs.
Okay.
In before you put YouTube on there. Max,
Install YouTube. Nope. I already got it here.
You have it on YouTube there?
When hurricanes or other natural disasters strike, getting information to the public isn't always easy. That's where ham radio operators often become a vital link to survival. Gloria Lopez joins us from our newsroom with more on that. Gloria?
Gerald, at a time when cell phone communication is virtually impossible and phone lines are down, we sat down with an amateur radio operator, also known as a ham radio operator, who is able to hear transmissions from the affected areas.
Looking for stations in the affected area for Hurricane Katrina.
So they're still collecting information as it's winding down.
When all else fails, this is the system that doesn't.
We like to say that ham radio is unstoppable.
Even when communication to the affected areas is impossible, ham radio operators like Gary Pierce make the impossible happen.
Your signal's a little bit weak, so let me turn the volume up and catch you one more time. I think.
From his home, Pierce can hear transmissions from ham operators in the hurricane-torn areas, passing vital information.
Pam will report in every hour or so with conditions as they are occurring where she is. Over.
In times of emergency, they can be a lifeline. Easy to use, simple to set up.
What we do is take an antenna like this. I'll use a slingshot and then pull the wire back up with it.
And just like that, the world
It's about 25 miles west of Pensacola.
is at his fingertips.
And provide that link of communications in just minutes of setup time.
We're looking for weather data, measured or observed weather data, or storm damage reports. Your call sign, please.
In the coming days, transmissions like that one will be a vital link, and in some cases, the only one.
It's just, to me, it is magic.
Okay, I'm gonna wait.
Gary tells us that most ham operators operate right out of their homes, but that many neighborhoods don't allow those antennas, and he thinks that's a shame, only because that's what operators need to pick up those signals from the affected areas. Gerald?
All right, Gloria Lopez reporting from our newsroom. Thanks.
So as you saw there, oh, okay.
The hand goes better the second time.
Wait, they'll be the third time. As you saw there, ham radio was used in emergencies, and this happens all the time. There's been incidents where people were just driving and there's been an accident, and you'll hear on the radio somebody relaying information to police. This ham radio is so heavily tied to emergency situations that the police actually have radio transmitters and broadcast in their helicopters and their cars. In many cases, the helicopters, if you tune to one of the helicopters and you followed it, you could download the live stream of the video coming down from the helicopter, because they want to show people that are trying to deal with emergency situations. Now, if you're wondering how to get a license, it's pretty simple. There's no age limit to get a license. There's no serious restrictions. To get a license, all you have to do is show up. The tests have gone from being very technical to being very, basically, trivia. It's common sense and just making sure you don't do anything you're not supposed to. There are classes all over. Most of them are free. And if they aren't free, it's only to pay for the book. And you can learn this in a couple of hours a week. As the sign-up sheet's going around, there's the question is if you want to take the class. If you are interested in that, please say yes so we can get a feel for who wants to take the class. We can do one here. We can let you know about other classes, and you can get your license very quickly.
Would it be free if you did it?
Yes, except for the license fee, which is $10. It's pretty cheap. Okay. How licenses work are, there's basically a call sign that is assigned to every person that has a license. It's unique, and it stays with you until you either do not renew it for a long period of time, I think it's 20 years, or you die. There's no exception to that. A license is set up by a series of words, well, characters, a number, and then more characters. The numbers in the front represent the prefix, which is where they are located in the U.S. The number also signifies where they are located, but that's a global chart. If you look online, you can look up the ham radio prefix numbers, and there's a number for every country in the world and every region. Some countries have more, some countries have less, but you can identify exactly where a person is just by where their call is. For example, the call sign in this says WB6. The W is for the western U.S., and the 6 means they are located in California, or they signed up in California. Contests work through these numbers. When you're trying to contact somebody, you use their call sign to locate where they are and see how far your contact has been. I have personally been able to contact people from here all the way to France with not much difficulty. And how that works is radio signals bounce. The lower the frequency, which is HF, the longer it takes for the radio signal to get messed up. So let me see if I can explain this. It's the only tricky part. If you're EC major, this probably should be easier for you. But radio waves are basically a bounce, or a sine wave. The peaks and the drops, that's each frequency, that's a wavelength. And then the frequency is how often that happens per second. A radio and the transmission is like a circuit. It goes from somewhere to somewhere and then back again. There's a full circuit that'll happen. If you break a circuit, for example, this antenna is not grounded to anything, so the circuit's broken and your signal won't be very good. But if you ground that circuit, you can get a lot of range. Now, frequencies are measured in hertz. They go up to megahertz, gigahertz, terahertz, and they're basically made up of energy. Now, this is a little technical, but basically everything is energy. The light you're seeing right now is energy. And so radio frequencies go from... Yeah. What? Oh, UFH.
Ultra frequency high.
Yeah, it's ultra frequency high. Thanks for catching that. The frequencies go from visible to non-visible. And we have TLF to very low frequency, which is 3 hertz to about 30 kilohertz. And this is used, as you can see, on subs, heart monitors, time communication, and computer noise. If you have something that can tune down to these frequencies, you'll hear a lot of noise in this room right now because people have their computers out. It doesn't sound good. When you get up higher, you go to the low frequency and high frequencies, which are primarily ham. These are also used for RFID, marine, and telephones. They are long range. They bounce off the atmosphere, which makes them go a lot further. You can also bounce off of moons, asteroids, even other planets if you have a powerful enough transmitter, which gives a very eerie communication, but it also lets you get the most range because you can bounce pretty much anywhere on Earth. Once you get up to VHF and UHF, that is what, if you first get your license, you would be. That is frequencies 30 megahertz to 3 gigahertz. These are things that you may know, like wireless, microwave, including the microwave that you might have in your house, Zigbee, which is a little device for wireless communication, TV, and also GPS. When you get up higher than that, that's EHF and THF, these are radio astronomy, gamma rays. These are things that you cannot see, but they can actually cause physical damage. And yes, you can actually transmit on some of these frequencies. So here's a little chart to show what it looks like. You can see at the lower end is the ham, AM frequencies, and then you get up to the THF frequencies, which are the poor guy with the X-ray. So there are different types of communication. I've mostly talked about simplex, which is from A to B. You turn the signal on, it goes to somebody else. But there are other types of signals that you can do too, including repeaters, which allow you to go from A to another location, and then from there to many locations. And that gives you a lot of range. There's the last one is the bounces, which bounce off of a object in space or the atmosphere. So here's some examples. They're probably going to break. Nope, they were. Okay, here's an example of a satellite bounce. We won't listen to the whole thing because it's really long, but this is communicating using a satellite, or there we go. Now what you'd be doing to communicate with this is you'd be taking an antenna that's directional and you'd be rotating it with the satellite and keeping track with it. So here's some audio. So you see, if you don't keep it in the right alignment, you don't get a lot of signal. Here you go.
KC2 UHB from N2NRJ, Fox Nancy 13.
And then if you want to do HF, which bounces long distance, here's something like this. And this is a South African station.
K5, Mike Quebec.
That you hit
Yes, Kilo 5, Mike Quebec. K5, Mike Quebec. You're 57, Louisiana, over. Roger, 73, Jimmy.
Okay, so there's a lot of different codes that are used in ham radio. You don't have to use any of them. QSL, as you heard before, is location, restate, and then 73 is basically goodbye. But you take time to learn those. They're not really important. Now, as I said before, repeaters. They allow you to talk farther than line of sight, which is about 20 miles or so. You can use something called Echolink or IRLP, which connects a radio over the internet, and that gives you much larger range. Some examples of this are the PAPA network and the WIN system. WIN system is 60 nodes all over the world, and at any given time you can hear somebody talking from them. There's other types of things that you can do with ham radio. Listening to things that have been left behind from the Cold War and some still used today. This is something called a number station. They transmit a series of numbers that can be decoded by whoever's wanting to do it. And they don't make much sense to most people. But some people do like going around trying to decode this. Now, there's more stuff. As I said before, you have to track a satellite, but once you do, you get the signal that the satellite's transmitting. This is actual data from a weather satellite that somebody downloaded and from it directly. You can see the scan lines as it was being downloaded and they moved out of the range. As you get into, I'm sure you guys are interested in digital communication. Wi-Fi is built off of ham radio. They use something called, Wi-Fi is based off of PSK, and so you hear something like this. Sounds like a bunch of tones, but in there is actual data. And then there's different, what? There's data in there.
I don't hear it right now.
Now,
Sounds like Pokemon.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So that is called MSFK. That's literally tones. There's actually no data in that, but the tones are converted into data. And how do you view this stuff? How do you decode it? You use something called a waterfall. A waterfall looks like this, and most ham radio programs these days have this feature built in. As you can see, here are carrier signals. They're solid lines. If you click on a line when you are on a waterfall program, it'll start decoding the signal. So here's one, and here's another one. This one is a really strong one. That's probably close, and you can see how it's disrupting the signal around it. and with waterfalls, you can do something called slow scan television. I'm sure you guys have seen it somewhere. Or not. Okay. Hold on. Why did it, yeah, it doesn't like video.
Oh, it's like I'm on the internet.
Is that how it's
It's hot. Yeah.
But you see how the signal is related to the picture. As the scan goes through, you can start generating a picture. Now, let's go back to the presentation. Oh, here's
Shift F5. Shift F5.
but the hand's better.
But Mac.
Okay.
But Mac.
So another example of slow scan television is the NASA broadcasts. They pioneered it with radio operators to develop a system that is still used today. I mean, it's not used that much, but slow scan television was what allowed us to see what was happening on the moon. The future is the star menu. The future is something called software-defined radio. It allows you to operate your radio like you would normally, but without all the buttons, the knobs, and the switches. Everything's in a easy-to-use interface, and it allows things to be done a lot quicker and allows for development of new protocols that can be used on radio. There's an interesting one that's being developed now based off of an Android device, custom built to be a radio. If you want to take a look, it's at edgesysdesign.com. Hard to pronounce. But they're working on some really cool stuff right now. So here's an example of a software-defined radio. And you can see it has everything in it. I also want to point out, when I went online to find this, I did not realize that the guy who this had, yeah, they are really into security because they have a password file and a text file.
They're also using ICQ. I think that's an old picture. I hope that's an old picture.
So where to start from here? Start looking into classes. Start looking into what you can do with ham radio. There is so much you can do, and once you get past technician, once you get into general and extra, that allows you to start developing your own custom protocols, start using the radio to develop what you want. And for example, the project I'm working on is a weather balloon project, using a Raspberry Pi and a ham radio. If you're interested in classes, let me know, let any of the eBoard members know. And there's a class coming up in Santa Ana that is by somebody named Gordon West. He's a really great teacher. You can get your test in 2 days. It's a weekend class, and you're pretty much guaranteed to pass. If you want to just check out what ham radio is about, same like Swift, there's a ham radio channel on Freenode that you can check out that has a bunch of interesting stuff on it. All right, thank you. Anybody have questions?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the difference between ham radio and CB radio?
CB radio is a lot lower power. Ham radio can go up to 1,500 watts. CB radio can go only up to 3, somebody said?
And that gives it
Like
more
10.
distance?
That gives you more distance. The frequencies that CB radio use are a lot smaller than what ham radio uses.
It's also unregulated.
Yeah.
You also find out where cops are with it.
You can do that with ham radio too. But for example, this, I know it's small, but all these yellow, the red, those are ham bands. CB radio is not even on this chart. That's how small it is. So you can definitely get an idea of how much more there is to be used with ham radio.
I have another question. You mentioned that you were able to get in contact with some dude in France, but how much equipment is required to get that much distance? Awesome.
And this antenna.
And how much is it, like, money-wise?
Now, when I bought this was 10 years ago. It was super expensive, probably about $500. Super expensive.
That's not that.
So now you can get a radio like this for about $50. Do you have your Baofeng?
I do, actually. So, if you want to get started, a good way to do that is this. It's a Baofeng. It's the UV5R, and they're $50. It comes with a charging station, pocket clip, spare battery, and it has access to all of the UHF and VHF frequencies that you can access as a technician. So this is a great radio to start with. And they've got them on Amazon, so...
Yeah, you can get them.
But you can't use them unless they have
Yeah,
You cannot
Question,
broadcast.
man.
That's the last question. You lied to us about the sign-up sheets. I don't see one.
They're right there. You cannot or you should not.
Oh.
What?
It's horrible.
They didn't get
If you transmit without a license,
They'll hunt you down and kill you.
yes, they will.
How many people are
They
buying
have
that?
antennas in all parts of the U.S. that their sole purpose is tracking down illegal broadcasts. They make it their mission to find you, because you're using a hammer. They find you, they can arrest you if you do it multiple times.
And then they shoot you.
Yeah. They send you to Guantanamo. But with ham radio, the reason they don't want you to transmit on those frequencies is because you can go into police bands, you can do a lot of stuff that could really mess up stuff, so it's bad news. Do you want to try, yeah, single. Do you want to try getting a hold of people? I can call out and see who's around. Let's see.
How about let's do this, because we're going to transition into doing the scale paperwork. So if you want to...
It won't work in here.
If you want to play with my ball.
Well, what else was I saying?
Yeah.
So if you want to see the ham radio working, follow Joe outside, unless you're on the list for scale, in which case you're stuck with us. So what we're going to do first, let's give him a big round of applause. Thanks, Joe. So next week, same time, same place. It's a secret. The talk is a secret. So, but it's going to be awesome. So I encourage you to show up. What I'd like to do now is do the scale stuff. So if you are going to scale.